Hello, hello, and huge thank you to everyone joining us today for today's panel on why AI necessitates a platform model or why your company desperately needs a platform model because of your inevitable use of AI. This is a lead dev online panel discussion created in partnership with Harness. The discussion will last about roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the lead dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the panel Q&A channel. So I'll add that link in the Slack if you're joining us live to join the really wonderful, inviting, and engaging lead dev Slack community. So we may have time to answer a couple questions live. We are happy to roll right through. We have plenty to talk about on this topic. However, you definitely can ask questions and are encouraged to if you're joining us live in the Q&A function of Zoom. And then if we don't get to finish it, like we said, we'll be on that Slack community, which has a lot more going on. So let's get started with some introductions. I'm Jennifer Riggins. I'm a technology journalist. And today I will be joined by these three lovely panelists that will share their experiences and insights. We'll let Rachel introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm the global CTO for Thoughtworks. Thoughtworks is a global tech consultancy of 10,000 individuals, and a high percentage of those are developers. And myself and the folks that work at Thoughtworks have been helping clients transform into modern development practices in the build, run, and modernize space for 25, 30 years. Everything related to that and AI is essentially what I have been doing, what I've been responsible for at least the last 3 years.
Okay. Martin?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yes. Hi, I'm Martin Reynolds. I'm a field CTO at Harness. I've been there a little while, and we're a software delivery platform, and essentially, I spend most of my time strategizing and helping customers how to really take advantage of secure, reliable software delivery. It's and also quite a lot of time on panels like this too.
We all are. And speaking of that, Nathen, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Nathen Harvey. I lead up the DORA program here at Google Cloud. If you've not heard of it, or even if you have, DORA is a research program that looks into how do technology-driven teams and organizations improve. We kind of have a center of gravity around software delivery performance. So you may have heard of DORA's software delivery performance metrics. But of course, our research over the last few years has been looking very deeply into the impacts of AI across the software development lifecycle.
It wouldn't be deep and talking about high performing without, for sure. So platform engineering are the same thing? Maybe, maybe not. The problem is that platform engineering has always been grounded in trade-offs and deciding what's best for the majority, and also in allowing people to choose whether they want to adopt or not. Or maybe that's a benefit, but when you're trying to set up guardrails and everything, you're just not sure who can do what, and do you want gates around some of the AI? There's a lot of things. Do you want it to be optional, your platform around AI? There's so many questions. But what if the majority of your engineering org has now grown to the majority of your employees? And then what if tool sets, data, users, everything is expanding exponentially at high speed? The platform team is likely not being invested in to grow at most companies. It's actually one of those teams falling under that last hired, first hired. And then AI is happening at a scale that we've never been used by everyone before. So what could go wrong? So thank you to everyone joining us today to talk about this topic. We're not pretending to have all the answers, but we are hoping you will get questions to bring back to your organization, because that's what's important, and hopefully you feel safe to do that. So let's get into it. I'm a journalist, so I like to lay, as the Brits say, table stakes, or maybe gamblers say that, but I think it's Brits. What is platform engineering and what is AI right now? Because I do believe this is something that could change within 6 months. Mm-hmm.
So are you just opening that wide up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the easier one to answer is what is platform engineering? I think what is AI is a moving target, right? I mean, like I'll tell you what I think platform engineer is, and then I'll, let the others join in. So to me, it's kind of if we think about like what we do in software, there's like functional requirements and there's like non-functional requirements. And the functional requirements is like the features, right? And when you get non-developers, they're like, especially with AI and agents now, they're like, I built it. Why isn't it in production? And you're like, well, let me list out the reasons and all the things that need to happen for that to securely be enterprise grade. And that obviously, what does enterprise grade in what context is a moving target. So I think about it as like the product management of like everything that has to happen in order for something to get into production. So it's capturing all of those cross-functional concerns that maybe every team has to hit, or certain teams have to hit, which might be like, is it secure? Is it deployable? Like all of these kinds of things. So to me, that's what, platform engineering is. And what I've seen, what we've seen, and what the studies are already showing is that organizations that have that strong foundation of like a good platform, right, that helps you with security, building, testing, deploying, all of those things, are able to take advantage of the exponential impact of, generating code with AI. And those that don't have that strong platform, essentially that exponential stuff is essentially creating exponential technical debt, and creating a lot of downtime and issues. And we've seen, loads and loads of things out there. So that's how I see the two playing together. I'm not going to define AI today. I don't have
Right.
time for the energy. But I'm interested to hear what the others think.
No,
Martin, who is the target audience of platform engineering then? Who's the user? To ask another really simple question.
so that's an interesting. So I totally agree, by the way, on the whole platform, the description of platform engineering. That I totally agree. It's really just that, turning your delivery process into a product, essentially. I think, the audience though has changed, right? Originally, the audience was, however many engineers that you had in your organization, and now I think that's changed, and I think AI is often the cause of that, right? So I think the audience has potentially changed, which is what Rachel was just alluding to, from your engineers to pretty much anybody in the organization who is willing to, maybe vibe code something up and want to get that out to production, as well as just, the agents themselves also become customers of that platform, right? Because you have, engineers that are maybe using agents to generate code, then agents that are maybe autonomously generating some code, plus your citizen developers who are also generating code, and they're all feeding that into the platform. And really, from my perspective, I think platform engineering essentially becomes that kind of operating system for that AI driven software delivery.
Do you not worry that bringing that many people in to being served by the platform takes it away from its original remit of the developers to serve the developers?
I, I, well, I'm going to say I'll let Nathan answer in a second, but I'm going to say no, not really, because if the goal of your platform was only to to improve developer experience, then you haven't really built a platform. What you've built is just, something that helps the, developer experience be better, but it doesn't necessarily do the other things that you want. Like, normally platforms are fairly opinionated. Yes, they're self-service, but normally they're governed. You have kind of golden paths to production. You have security that needs to be complied with. So, the goal of the platform isn't just to make the developer's life easier. The goal of the platform is to have a governed path to production for all the software that is built in your organization.
Okay, Nathan,
Yeah.
bring the
Yeah,
door in.
I mean, I agree with that. And look, I think that I think the role of the platform is to improve developer experience. Like if we talk about a platform as a product, we have to understand who are the customers of that product. And to Martin's point, like it I don't know, go back 18 months and the customer was developers. And we want to not only improve their developer experience, but how do you measure that developer experience? It is largely how do we enable them to deliver technology to customers? And that's the important bit. It's not just necessarily the how much fun do they have in their editor. It is about that holistic experience. And with AI, and I think that we should probably set some boundaries around AI for this discussion. Like when we talk about I think largely what we are talking about is using AI within the software development and delivery lifecycle, which is somewhat different to say adding new AI capabilities to your application. Maybe that's sort of secondary to what we're talking about here. We're really kind of focused on that developer experience. But as Martin was saying, as AI comes in and we start using it more and more, we now have agentic experiences. So now the agents are the consumers, the customers of our product. So we do have to think about them. And then obviously, as again, as Martin was saying, like we've moved from sort of developer experience, including agent experience, and now even what I'll call builder experience, sort of that citizen developer. Anyone can build when they're using AI. And so one of the fun questions that I like to ask when I'm giving a presentation or meeting with a customer is what's stopping you from taking that solution that was generated by AI and shipping that directly to production? What's stopping you? And everything that comes out as an answer, these are all capabilities that you should consider building into your platform so that nothing is stopping you, so that a builder can go and generate an application, generate some capability, some functionality, and we can ship it safely and confidently into production, get it in the hands of users. But I think just answering that question, like what's stopping you from YOLOing that solution into production? There's the roadmap for your platform right there.
And are you finding patterns to the answers of what's stopping them? Do they not know the answers? Or is it specific patterns that come often?
Oh, there's definitely lots of consistent sort of themes and patterns. The first, you could put probably most of them into a big bucket of trust. I don't trust what the AI has generated. All right. But then you kind of have to break that down. Well, what do you mean by trust and how do you know? And so it turns into things like we need to do reviews. We need to have feedback cycles where we can validate that it's built a thing that is secure, that's safe, that's meeting the requirements that we want, and so forth. So how do you build those feedback mechanisms into your platform, again, so that everyone can feel safe building with AI?
Shouldn't you be zero trust by default anyway?
I mean, of course, maybe you should. But, zero trust doesn't mean we don't trust anything, so we don't ship anything. We're frozen in time. Like that's not a real thing. We have to be able to change applications. In fact, if we can't change what we've built, we shouldn't trust them either because new vulnerabilities, new challenges, new exposures are going to come to light. And if we can't change the application, we can't trust it running in production. So we have to be able to change it.
Yeah,
And you're
I mean, it's
touching
interesting.
on, sorry.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Jennifer, you're touching on something that, I think the trap that people fall into with some of these platforms, right? Which is it's like a complete lockdown, only one path to production, must meet all of these trust requirements. And when it's too hard, it slows everything down, and that creates the issue that Nathen described, which is then you can't get things to production, and you're back in the old world of very slow paths to production, not being able to respond to the vulnerabilities, things like that. But you've also got you're not like you end up with more shadow IT type behaviors when it's too controlled and too locked down. So when we're thinking about, why we always mash developer experience and platform engineering together because it was for developers, right? And now we're saying actually now it's also agents and now it's also that citizen developer. So now we've got different users.
Everyone.
So it's everyone. So but we have to build different paths for everyone because when it was a developer experience, like you expose an API to a developer knows what an API is. You expose an API to somebody that works in marketing or sales and they have no idea what you're talking about, right? So how it gets exposed. And then similarly for the agents, it's probably a different interface. And I think that's stuff that we're just kind of exploring, right? MCP is only just a thing, then skills is just a thing, right? So it's also changing really quickly in terms of like what are those different endpoints and who you're exposing it to. So there's more than one like path through the system. There's also I've been talking a lot and thinking a lot recently about kind of the risk profiling of the software. Like this is already inherent, I think, and especially in highly regulated organizations, like there's certain software that's very high value, very high impact if something goes wrong. And there's other stuff that's maybe internal that's less so, right? And so you're going to have different expectations and different guardrails for different types of software. And you need those paths in your platform, but there has to be some flexibility and adaptability in there. And it's interesting, you talk about we're reducing funding in these platform engineering teams exactly the time when you're probably going to need more to enable more people to be able to build functionality. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a real challenge for organizations if they're not investing in these things, because that's where you get all the, potential issues, the downtime, the risks, things happening, or you get a platform that's too fixed, right? Where it's not adapting to the changing environment, so people can't use it. So it does need to be a living, breathing thing. And it does need to be a first-class concern if you want to enable like citizen development and agentic development at scale.
Which some
Yeah.
companies may not, that risk profile. Martin?
No, I was just going to say, really, that like for me, the goal, like you don't want to be the people who say no, realistically. And so, the goal isn't really control. The goal is like safe acceleration, right? That's you want to safely get the software. So, yes, you want to make it easy to get all the right stuff done, and you want to make it difficult for them to build that shadow system to do it. But I think one of the things that really helps with that is making sure that you have visibility when it goes off track, right? So if it goes off track, it needs to have the right visibility so people know why it's gone off track, right? Because then they're less likely to go and like find a way around it, and more likely to go, oh, it's gone off track because this just doesn't stay up very well because it's got a huge memory leak. And I don't know what that means, but I now know who I can go talk to about that. Like that visibility is and like an essential part of a platform. If it's a black box that just says you can do this and can't do this, and it's never going to work. It's just never going to work.
Yeah. And that becomes even more critical now as things are changing so fast, right? And we just did the recent technology radar that we put together, and we were having new tools that when we checked like the GitHub repo, it was 3 weeks old because it's so easy to build new open source
Yeah.
tools now. And the platform needs to adapt to, developers or whoever's saying, I want to use this tool, I want to use this tool. So you have to have some way for them to also get, a pretty quick response on, is that going to go through? Can they make that change? Can they add that to the platform? And if not, why not? But it's that the pace of that tool changes also, a critical factor in the adaptability of the platform, and another reason why it becomes such an important factor when we think about it as exactly what Martin said, as the enabler for the acceleration you want. This is the critical piece to get that acceleration.
Yeah, and to just pull on the acceleration metaphor a little bit further, right? If you go and look at racing teams, they get good at accelerating because they trust their brakes, and they not only trust that they have good brakes, but they also trust that they know when to sort of deploy those brakes. So it goes back to that thing that Martin was talking about, the observability and understanding what are the conditions under which I do need to put a brake on. I do need to roll back a change. I do need to put some extra, maybe this change is extra risky. So I need to put some additional eyes on that before it goes out. Having that capability built into your platform, and maybe AI can help us with that, risk assessment and so forth. But building that into the platform, I think is paramount. It's super important.
Oh, I love that. I actually recently read an article that was entitled "Accelerating by Having Good Brakes," which was talking about that exact thing. So I do love that. I did. So one of the things that I've noticed a little bit in talking to people is that when they talk like the talk about golden pathways has changed slightly. Instead of talking them about in terms of like standardization, they're actually reframing it as the audience gets bigger, as to like they're really about defaulting decisions. So here's a bunch of things where these are the decision defaults, and then and when you talk about it in that framing, it actually then allows that kind of discussion about, okay, but I can't default to that. I need something different here. But this is the default path rather than the fixed like route. And going back to what Rachel said earlier, there definitely should be more than one, and there should be different kinds. I don't know many organizations that have one path to production.
I mean,
Like mine.
most organizations have 3 to 6 platforms anyway that they know of.
Yeah, I mean that's like a whole other thing, right? Is that because you're in danger of also creating like some kind of monster Uber platform as well. So I think that and it kind of relates to the team topologies concept, right? There's a concept of like there's a centralized platform, but most organizations have like another platform that they've somewhat like built as an extra components around it, which may be related to it's highly regulated or it's a very specific domain or whatever. So yeah, and I think, but it can go. I think the two bad cases, I guess, is like one path to production, which is where nobody adopts it and everybody does their own thing, or like an innumerable paths to production where everybody's built their own pipeline and there's no standardization. So we know it's in the middle, but this is that like those trade-offs still exist in like what goes in the platform, and which path, who is it for, and what's the extensibility of the platform, and who owns those extensible components, and how do you keep these things in line with each other. And I actually think it's getting, I mean, this isn't this what's interesting, I think, about this is not only is this more important, it's getting harder and harder to do. And more complex because it's also something we've been exploring with. It's also reaching into this concept of context and prompt engineering as well, is that the feedback loops that you have in your platform and the guardrails also now have to kind of sit in the IDE space, and also be synced and aligned so that when you're building things, you also, you get it right as much as possible. So you're not just immediately just as soon as you go through the platform, you just get, masses of failures. So that's also another thing we have to weigh up of like, how do you keep those things in sync? What needs to be in the feed forward mechanism versus the feedback mechanism? And I think that I also think about that as it's probably not the platform, but it's like in the context of, I think, what we're now calling a harness for the whole like agentic development cycle. This also needs to be a part of it. It can't be like a separate thing that stands separately. It has to be in line with how the platform is also evolving, just to add more complexity to the situation.
But then, as we're talking about citizen developers, is that something most companies, especially well-regulated companies, want? Do they want this opt-in, or you can build and go a separate way? For example, I'll go for my own people, marketing. Or do you want them allowed to go off the rails with AI? Or is platform engineering maybe specifically for them not appropriate, and we should keep focused on our developers, not our citizen developers who are very important and will do the most interesting things, the subject matter experts with AI, but do we want them access to production?
I think. Oh.
No, go ahead, Nathan.
I think every day that we talk about not allowing our citizen developers or builders across the organization to have access to the platform is a day that like incentivizes shadow IT further and further. And shadow IT really, frankly, as someone in IT, we tend to use that as a sort of a pejorative label on things that people outside of IT are doing. But the reality is, it should be a pejorative label on the things that we are not enabling. So I think it's worse for us when there's more shadow IT, because shadow IT to me has always been an indicator that the business is getting done what the business needs to get done. And they're doing that by the means that they have available to them. And if the platform isn't enabling that, if our IT, if our technologists in the organization aren't enabling that, we are by definition deterring it. And they're often doing their own things. And then I also think that this also comes back to sort of risk profiling and understanding what is it that these builders or these citizen developers are trying to build. I work in a bank. I don't work in a bank, but let's say I work in a bank. There are certain things, credit card payments or payment processing that has a different risk element than, let's say, the internal employee directory or the internal app that tells me what's available at lunch today in the cafe. These have very different risk profiles, but they're all in the financial services industry because we both work in a bank. Let's make sure that we understand the differences between those two and we're enabling the right things for each of those. And that's where you start to get to a platform being kind of a pile of capabilities on top of which we can build multiple platforms, multiple guardrails, and so forth.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of that, because I think there's definitely two clear layers for me, which is really there's like the platform layer, which we've kind of been talking about here, but then I think there's like I don't know what you call it, like the experience layer, for want of a better phrase, which is, it's not the same for everyone. And the level of abstraction is different for different consumers, right? Everyone needs the same guardrails in place, right? To get roughly to get the software out there, if that makes sense. But they don't necessarily need that same abstraction. Some people are going to need, they're going to be wanting that detail, and some people are like, I just have this thing that I want to use internally, and their experience needs to be very different, even if the underlying mechanisms are the same. I think it's, and so you're kind of, we're going back to where we started a little bit, because we started talking about it's not just for developers, that the platform does other things, but they are the customer. It's just the customer base got bigger, and so now you have different experiences for different kind of users, almost where your engineers are your power users, and your and I love the term builders over system developers, by the way. And your builders, have a slightly simplified experience, but allows them to get the job done and still has all the right guardrails and policies and everything in place.
Okay, but we're still talking about expanding the platform and who the platform serves exponentially when we have this problem where platform teams are not getting investment. So how are we going to deal with this idea of this increase? And to be honest, let's be fair, it's always been a pipeline problem where we've always had more requests than we could handle, and there's never been enough training and enough moving people into these roles. So how do we deal with this at scale, and how do you actually, because you all work in senior leadership roles, how do you convince senior leadership to invest in this when there are so many things you can invest in right now and all they want to invest in is AI?
I mean, they are investing in AI, right? They're investing in the enablement, and as Nathan said, in the enablement of the building side of AI, right? Because we're not talking about, the actual agentic applications and new workflows and things like that, but it is investing in AI. And I think it behooves the technology leaders to have conversations with the business leaders of like, we want to enable your teams. This is kind of what it takes to do that. It's a critical factor to do it well, right? And this is more of the consulting and influencing skills than the hard facts. But there are like the hard facts are out there of like when you don't have this strong platform or this strong engineering culture, which usually strong engineering cultures end up with really good platforms. When you don't have that, it's just technical debts. Like I've produced a bunch of stuff, but now I've got lots of issues. When you do have it, you get to produce all the stuff, but you don't get the issues, right? Because when you have issues, you've got to fix the issues, and then your resources are fixing issues and in reactive mode versus actually, doing the work that enables the work to get done. I do think that I think like one of the hypotheses I have about, because that's part of my job as a CTO, is to kind of think about what do I think will happen? Where will things go? And then I test those out, and then we run kind of experiments both with our clients and internally, is as there's more and more builders out there, because right now we're still only the tip of the iceberg. It's not like everyone we know that isn't technical isn't necessarily using these things in anger. They're still just using it as like a chat interface, most of them, or like a Google extension, essentially a search engine extension. But when people really start using this in anger and realizing the things that they can do, the workflows that they can automate, it's the problem's only going to get worse in terms of the need to enable them to get into production safely. And I have a theory that essentially a lot of our like core engineers will end up in the architecture and platform space, like helping with design decisions, and we'll do a lot less feature work, right? Like we probably won't build features. The builders, the non-technical people will build out the features and we'll be the ones that help them design it in a way that's appropriate. And as much of that, those conditions for a good design as we can put into the platform or into the feed forward mechanism as possible, great. That actually enables them even more because, the rest of it will be conversations and discussions about the design and what does good look like and why take one approach versus another. So that's kind of where I see it going. And I think if more people I talk to, the more people like that actually makes a lot of sense. I could see it going that way. Then you can, when you're looking at how do I redesign my organization to enable AI? Because I think that's the question people aren't really asking yet is like, how does the whole org design with this in mind? What teams can we trial this out in? And then you would end up potentially with the same amount of development resources. They're just moving to a different place, right? Instead of them developing features, they're developing the platform components, the feed forward, the feedback mechanisms, the architecture, and the design decisions. And the builders out there can build out their features with all this built in. And that to me is like, I think what a really enabled organization will look like in the future. And so in that world, you don't need more people, you don't need more engineers, you just need to put them in the right place.
Yeah, and from a leadership perspective, that sounds like you're just highly leveraging your engineering resources, right? You're getting a lot more leverage out of the amount of capacity that you have today, and you're getting that leverage by enabling the rest of the org.
No, I totally agree. And it was interesting listening to that just because literally only this morning I was watching some news and they were saying how they were talking about the impact of AI on jobs and everything else. And they were saying, interestingly, uh, software development has been one of the biggest spaces that has adopted it. And there was a lot of concern about, reduction in number of heads and everything else. Yet the number of roles that are actually available and have been like people are looking to recruit has actually gone up. It went up over the last like 12 months, not down. So interestingly, that kind of paradox of, hey, we've got AI, we don't need as many developers isn't necessarily true. It's as you say, they're actually leveraging in a lot of ways, it's increasing the need because there's a whole bunch of other stuff around
Yeah.
it.
I have my own. I got very angry when I first started seeing that we won't need developers anymore because I'm like, what do you think we do around here? Just write code?
Yeah.
It's not what we
Same
actually
with
do,
writing, like
No,
the
Typing
idea
code is
that
not the job.
the
no,
interview is the most important part of journalism, and people aren't going to have those same conversations with AI. We have fabulous audience questions, which I think get to one of our topics we definitely wanted to talk about, which was security and shifting left security. So the first audience question, may I read, is, while I agree with the term, the customer base got bigger, I'd argue that your customer base has fundamentally changed. Code quality and code review has never been more important at this point. How does one adjust their platform to serve both an experienced engineer that understands the code that's been written versus a builder who doesn't understand what has been written, specifically from the security point of view, which is a huge part of this?
I mean, I will actually reference back to what Rachel and Nathan were both saying, which is really that thing of your engineers, your actual software engineers role changes because this is where the engineers work with the builders and work with the AI to actually help solve those problems. So they become, that kind of architectural points. And I think, we can also use, ironically, you can use AI to help with this too, because,
Yeah.
for things like security vulnerabilities and, more and more AIs can work out how to solve that, potentially propose the fix for that. And, uh, there'll be a point at which we trust it enough to say, yes, you can just go ahead and merge that fix rather than waiting for it to, on a PR or a merge request. But I think, I think the engineers become part of that process in enabling builders. And I think that's going to be the case. And I also think, AI within the platform is also going to help facilitate and solve some of that because it's not just going to say, it's not just saying, hey, here's the problem. And this is the evolution really inside platforms. It's no longer saying, hey, here's the problem. It's, hey, here's the problem and here's the solution and here's why we think this is the solution for you, right? It's,
That's
it's
important.
taking it way beyond where it was to really help drive that.
Yeah, that
And
auditability is super important, and AI for DevOps, I guess we'll call it.
and I think it's that automated assurance, right? So regardless of who's built, let's have some automated assurance that it is secure. And we'll take those findings and, to Rachel's point, we'll use that feedback and we'll move it into our feed forward mechanisms so that as a builder, I don't have to say in a prompt, like just to get super simple, like build me an app that does foo. Instead, I have to say, build me a secure app that does foo. I don't have to say the difference there. Like the AI knows because of our built-in feed forward, our built-in context that we have. Here's what secure looks like. Here are the assurances that we need to make on any bit of code that goes out there. And frankly, I think that we are fast approaching. Maybe we've already crossed the line where a human reviewing every line of code that's generated it is no longer sustainable. And so what would better serve you as an organization, taking the capacity that you have today of humans reviewing every line of code, or taking that same capacity and building better automated assurance and better automated feedback? You're probably served more by the latter because the rate at which we're generating code is only going to increase from here. And expecting a human to look at it and frankly, like, the other good question I like to ask is, what is the purpose of code review? And unfortunately, it's one of these things in our software development lifecycle that has 27 different purposes. And frankly, that's too many reasons to have a single thing, a single event, a single choke point in our pipeline. We need to really consider, why do we have code reviews? What purposes are they serving? And how can we offload some of those goals into other parts of our process, into other technologies, whatever it is? But I think we're quickly approaching a place where code reviews go away.
Yeah. And then I think I think what Nathan and Martin said is true, right? The guardrails are the guardrails. They say the same. What secure software looks like in that context with that risk profile, that stays the same. But the interface is going to be different, right? Like the developer will be able to access a different layer of abstraction because they have a better understanding, right? I guess it's the difference between I am a Claude code like convert. I love it. I'm in there all the time. But friends that I have that are not technical, they use different tools that have higher levels of abstraction, and they love them, but they also tie themselves in knots really quickly as well. They've told me. So I think there's going to be different interfaces, but the guardrails should remain the same. And I think I can foresee in the short term or medium term that very high risk areas of software, like highly regulated or credit card payments or something, we'd probably still want a senior engineer to look at it, right? But eventually, when that trust builds, you won't feel that need. But I think in the meantime, but yeah, we actually had an event recently where we did that deep dive with Nathan and others in like, why do we do code reviews? And the list of reasons was endless. It was like this sub for mentoring people, for code maintainability and readability, for people understanding the design of the code. Like the list was endless, and it was like, okay, we need to break that down and be like, where are the other places that does that still need to happen? Where are the other places that we would do that? Because the code, nobody's like maybe some people are, but it was the message is that the code review now is so big and so intense. It's such a bottleneck that people are just click, 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 like don't really have time to read that. It's too much stuff.
I think that's been true for a while, by the way, even before AI. I think there was definitely, you'd look at a team and go, the same person's approving every single PR, and
And that
on
can
top
be
of that,
glue
it's
work
taking
too.
them 5 minutes to do all of them. So
Yeah.
And
I think,
by the way, like at ThoughtWorks, we've been going against pull requests for years. We've been saying trunk-based development is the answer. Pull request is a way to, it's actually shifting something right that needs shifting left. And if you have trunk-based development, that forces you to have good guardrails in your build pipeline and more of this automation that Nathan was talking about. Um, and just admit that no one's actually reviewing the code. So the pull request like whole
yeah,
workflow it's not valuable anymore, right? And so we need to relook at that. Why did we do it? What was the value we thought we were getting out of it? Is there another way to create that value?
I've actually heard, I can't say which organization it is, unfortunately, but they're very retail, uh, retail based in terms of like their customer base is online. And I remember sitting probably about 6 months ago now, and they were saying, "Hey, we just pushed our first, whatever it was, like 8 or 10,000 line thing through into production." And the other people around the table were like, "Oh my God, how can you trust that? What, aren't you scared it's going to break your system? You know, that's your front door to everything that you do, kind of thing." And they were very like, "Well, no, we believe we have all the right guardrails in place, so we felt comfortable doing it. Yes, this was the first one and it felt a bit momentous, if that makes sense, but actually we see this as the new normal. We just want to make sure we've got all the right stuff in place that we feel comfortable for those to go through." And they were basically saying, we're going from managing by review everything to review by exception, the same way you do for, any good, mature system. You manage by exception, not by default.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I want to ask one more question because we have time because someone accused you, Nathan. So I want to make sure
Oh,
that, well,
Accused.
didn't accuse, but they called you out. So I want to make sure we do that. But I promise you, we will continue in the Slack community because we have a lot of questions. Thank you. You're a very good audience. So someone said, concerned that Nathan isn't taking into account the fact that you have to balance the risk involved with rolling out code without human in the loop oversight. Who owns the code when there are problems?
Mm.
I think
You feel
I think
strong
this is
about
a this
it.
this is a very, very good point. And actually it's a point that I think Rachel made earlier, thinking about or maybe it was Martin, probably it was both, but thinking about the role of a developer and how that's changing and the new skills that we need, skills like accountability, skills like delegation. In many instances, we are going to start delegating tasks to agents. I still have to take accountability for that code that ships. We can't blame the agent. But in the same way that if I write some code and it takes down production, um, frankly, I shouldn't have been blamed for that, right? We have to have a much healthier approach to risk management, a much healthier approach to learning from incidents, not trying to figure out like who's to blame here. So I do think it is really important that we as engineers and as an engineering team and as an engineering organization do take that accountability. We are ultimately the ones responsible. The people are the ones responsible for setting up the right processes, the right systems, writing the correct code to get things into production that work really well. And probably at least as importantly, for identifying when that has failed so that we can learn from and recover from that and then adjusting those systems, those processes, that code, etc. So I think that is super important. And yeah, I absolutely
Mhm.
thanks for calling me out. Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll add to that just quickly because when you get a failure in production or anywhere, it's not a person's failure, it's a system failure, right? And something in
Exactly.
the system doesn't work, or needs fixing, or needs adjusting, or needs changing. I think what Nathan was touching on, it's just something I've also talked about a lot recently, is developers used to be like it was focus deep work, really, like, and we would always complain when we had to go to a meeting or we got distracted because of all the challenges of that shift from one task to another. But that's changing to directing agents, so you're becoming like a manager or like an executive, but you're still accountable, right? So then it becomes even more important to figure out how to automate all the guardrails, which comes back to this platform engineering topic. And just that role now becomes really critical, which is why people lean into we need more senior engineers. It's like that's why you need more senior
Yeah.
engineers. But that immediately opens up the question, how are you going to grow your next generation of junior engineers? Which is, and I have this other idea that we need like a really strong apprentice model
Yeah.
for people to
Mhm.
learn about all the different cross-functional, non-functional concerns that's really going to end up being more of the core of our role and the architecture and engineering and design discipline that we kind of learn along the way in a bit of a haphazard way in our career paths right now. We're going to have to be much more intentional about how we manage that and get people to learn because they are going to be accountable for more. So they need to make sure that they have that solid grounding in those challenges that can and trust and risks and issues that could be created.
And
Yeah.
now more than ever, tech teams are going to need more business insights. It's all about the outcomes. And that involves talking to other people. Again, oh dear. We have run out of time, but not out of questions. So I invite the three of you, if you're able to join us in Slack, and we will start asking them in a lovely thread in panel Q&A. And I thank you all so much. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to our listeners. This is a great topic for lead dev, and I'm glad it just naturally full circle came back to psychological safety, which is part of the ethos. And thank you, Harness, for sponsoring this conversation. Have a great day, y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.